The Senate held its latest Arctic frost hearing this week, and this exchange between Senator Whitehouse and former FBI Special Agent Christopher O'Leary gets to the core of the debate. Watch this.
Mr. O'Leary, is the reason that a prosecutor would pursue a non-disclosure order for a toll record subpoena necessarily that it is the subject of the subpoena who would attempt to interfere with or obstruct the investigation, as opposed to the subject of the investigation who would attempt to interfere with and obstruct the investigation?
Senator, it depends on the investigation. It could be the subject of the investigation. It could be associates. The idea of a non-disclosure order is to not really let an individual know that they're under investigation.
But one cannot infer from the existence of a non-disclosure order any accusation that the subject of the order was intending to interfere or obstruct. It could just as easily be that it was actually the subject of the investigation, one of the conspirators, for instance, who the court was concerned about, who the prosecutor was concerned about.
It certainly could be, but as I was communicating to Senator Cruz, non-disclosure orders are a routine part of FBI investigations.
Understood. So in your view, what has happened to the FBI and DOJ's national security capabilities in the last 15 months?
They've been decimated. There's been generational damage done.
And with respect to the quiet bastion you referred to, and the standards of virtue and integrity that you spoke so passionately about, were those standards of virtue and integrity, the fidelity, bravery, and integrity of the FBI, met by agents who Kash Patel then turned on and fired?
There is rampant morale, degradation, uncertainty amongst the ranks, and really disheartened career federal public servants who've been dismissed without cause. And
because, in fact, their colleagues understood that they, in fact, met those standards for fidelity, bravery, and integrity, and were nevertheless fired, correct?
Correct.
DOJ and the FBI run under close institutional checks and balances designed to protect the integrity of the organization. Were those applicable to special counsel?
I would assume so. I wasn't involved in that investigation at all, but I can speak to the process that Washington Field Office would follow, and those are the agents that supported that investigation. And
they would follow traditional, regular FBI guidelines.
The documents that I was able to review demonstrated that.
Are you aware that the Trump Department of Justice in the first term subpoenaed information from members of Congress and members of Congress's staff, including toll records?
Senator, the FBI conducting public corruption investigations has been part of its mission for years. I know it's probably disconcerting to any member of Congress or public official, but the FBI does it with the same integrity that it conducts any investigation. I would say to a fellow Irishman, we would probably work with them on an investigation, but the FBI pursues these despite what side of the aisle you're on.
And they did in the first Trump term of office, and that included getting non-disclosure orders so that the members of Congress did not know their toll records had been subpoenaed, correct?
That is correct. It's routine.
Tell me a little bit, as we wrap up here, about the work of the CI-12 unit and what condition it is now in as hostilities with Iran exist.
So CI-12 is a foreign counterintelligence squad in Washington Field Office, and the agents that were dismissed from there and from the counterintelligence division at FBI headquarters work a variety of counterintelligence priorities. Iran is one of them, and dismissing some of these people just days before the war with Iran kicked off, creates problems with sustained focus and could impact operations.
And in fact, some of the FBI's institutional knowledge is contained in the knowledge and experience of senior FBI agents. And so when they are purged for political reasons, that component of the Bureau loses something fairly significant.
That is true, Senator. So there were some senior leaders at headquarters that were removed. And then in this last year alone, 2 assistant directors from Washington field office were both removed.
My time is up. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Without objection, I'd like to
With respect to the question of the NDOs and the reason for that, I'd like to put into the record the letter that I wrote to Speaker Johnson, giving what I consider to be the accurate background related to that, dated January 15, 2026.
Without objection, will be entered into the record.
Thank you.
Also, without objection, I want to introduce into the record a November 2nd, 2023 letter from Chairman Grassley to the DOJ Office of Inspector General, raising concerns that in 2017, DOJ subpoenaed personal phone and email records of Republicans and Democrat congressional staff. I'm also entering into the record a November 8th, 2023 letter from me, Chairman Grassley, and Senator Lee to Attorney General Garland, raising similar concerns and requesting information on the subpoenas of congressional staff. Contrary to what Senator Whitehouse said in his opening, Republicans did raise concerns about the DOJ obtaining records from congressional staff of both parties. And I will say, just a minute ago, Mr. O'Leary, you were being asked by Senator Whitehouse about investigating members of Congress, and it is certainly true that DOJ has a long tradition if there's evidence of particular misconduct. For example, our former colleague, Senator Menendez, is currently incarcerated in prison for corruption. And if you've got evidence of criminal conduct of one individual, the Department of Justice has an obligation to investigate that. Would you agree that's qualitatively different than a fishing expedition targeting 20% of the Republicans in the Senate? Would you agree that's qualitatively different?
I'm not familiar with the details of either investigation, so I wouldn't want to speculate.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you be troubled if tomorrow the Trump Department of Justice issued a subpoena for the phone records of every Democrat that sits on the Judiciary Committee?
Not if it was based on factual evidence, specific and articulable facts.
Well, let me be clear. I'd be damn troubled. And that would be an abuse of power. And I'm going to predict not a single Democrat's going to say even a word about the abuse of power on their side. And that double standard is troubling. Senator Lee.
So here's what you need to understand about what's really at stake in this hearing, because both sides are making arguments the other doesn't really want to address. On one side, there are serious concerns about what's happening inside the FBI right now. Director Kash Patel fired about a dozen agents from CI-12, a counterintelligence squad at the Washington field office that tracked Iranian threats, foreign espionage and classified information cases. Those firings came days before the U.S. launched Operation Epic Fury against Iran. These were agents who had spent years developing confidential sources inside the Iranian community on American soil. That kind of institutional knowledge doesn't get rebuilt quickly. That's a real national security concern, and it deserves scrutiny regardless of which party raises that question. On the other side, the underlying scandal that prompted this hearing is just as serious. Arctic Frost was an FBI investigation that issued 197 subpoenas targeting more than 430 Republican individuals and entities. Investigators pulled phone records from 8 sitting U.S. senators. They compiled a wish list of 14 members of Congress, some of whom sit on the very committee holding this hearing. They obtained roughly 2 years of Kash Patel's personal phone data from January 2021 through February 2023. They swept up donor lists, internal comms, and records from 92 Republican organizations. All of it was hidden behind non-disclosure orders and locked inside FBI prohibited access files that most agents in the Bureau couldn't see. This investigation was opened by Timothy Thibault, an FBI supervisor who was later found to have violated the Hatch Act for anti-Trump political conduct. AG Garland, Deputy AG Monaco, and FBI Director Wray all personally signed off on that. And when one of the witnesses at this hearing was asked what crimes this entire operation actually uncovered, the answer was none. That's the question that hasn't been answered. If this was a legitimate, properly predicated investigation, where are the charges? What did 197 subpoenas and 430 targets actually produce other than the phone records of political opponents locked in secret files that no one was ever supposed to see? Senator Cruz put a hypothetical to the witness. Would you be troubled if the Trump DOJ subpoenaed the phone records of every Democrat on the Judiciary Committee? The witness hedged. Cruz said he'd call it an abuse of power regardless of which party did it. And that's where this lands for the American public. Whether your concern is an FBI director firing counterintelligence agents days before a war, or a special counsel secretly collecting the phone records of elected officials and burying them in restricted files, both of those things should probably trouble you. The question isn't which side you're on. The question is whether the institutions meant to protect you are operating with the integrity you deserve. The Senate Judiciary Committee has authorized a full series of Arctic frost hearings through 2026. More documents are being released. 2 fired FBI agents have filed a federal lawsuit challenging their termination. So this is far from over. I'm Eric Stern, and this is The Founding Press.